school, and so it is just like perfect because you guys have an influence. You guys have an influence. So the vision is to make Jesus known. And I said it last week or 2 weeks ago, but Craig Rochelle says it like this, that you aren't just filling youth group or filling church, but when you tell someone about Jesus, you are robbing hell and filling heaven. So making Jesus known is not just about bringing more people to the AMP on Tuesday nights. It is not just about bringing more people to church on Sunday morning. But by you telling someone about Jesus, you are robbing hell and filling heaven, which is so cool to me. Like, it is so cool that just by telling someone about Jesus, you are robbing hell and filling heaven. And this is also it's so important to me because I did not grow up in church. I did not go to church when I was a kid. I went on Christmas and Easter with my parents, and that was it. And it wasn't until in middle school, when I was in about 6th grade, when someone invited me to youth group for the very first time. They invited me to the AMP. I came to youth group. I met Pastor Isaac, who was a youth pastor at the time. And since then, I was always at youth group. No matter what I had going on, I was at youth group, and it changed my life forever because one person invited me to youth group. I do not know where I would be if someone didn't invite me to youth group in middle school. I don't know what I would be doing, but it changed my life forever. I'm not sure if I would even have a relationship with Jesus. But because someone in middle school reached out and invited me to youth group, it changed my life forever. You guys don't understand or realize the impact you could have on someone's life just by inviting them to church or just by inviting them to youth group or by telling them about Jesus. You don't understand the impact and the effect you could have on someone's life. And all of you guys have an influence, but you have to use it. If you are in school, then you have such a great opportunity because you have hundreds of students around you every single day, many of them who do not know Jesus. You have an opportunity. You have an influence. You have to use it, whether it's your friends at school or if you play on a sports team. Then be a leader on your team and tell the kids on your team who don't know Jesus to come to church, to go to youth group, to pray before games, whatever it looks like for you. Use that influence you have, or if you're homeschooled, you got neighbors, there's other people around you, there's random people in the grocery store. Don't make an excuse like, I'm homeschooled, I can't tell anyone. Yes, you can. You see people all the time. It's just whether you really step out and you use that influence or not. Or it could just be random people in public. Whatever it is, you can have an impact on someone's life by simply inviting them to church, inviting them to youth group, or telling them about Jesus and what Jesus has done for them. And so the vision for this year has been based off this verse, which is in Romans 10, it's verses 13 through 15. And it says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." Awesome. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scriptures say, "How beautiful are the feet of the messengers who bring good news." Man, it's good to know that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But it says, how can they call on him if they've never, or if they don't believe? And how can they believe if they have never heard? So that is why it is your job. It is my job to go and preach the gospel, to tell other people about Jesus, to tell other people about the price that Jesus paid for them, to go and spread the gospel. And that is why in Mark 16:15, the last thing Jesus tells the disciples, the Great Commission, he says in Mark 16:15, and then he told them, "Go into all the world and preach the good news to everyone." Go into all the world and preach the good news to everyone. You are called to preach the gospel. You are called to tell other people about Jesus. You are called to be a light in the darkness, to show others his goodness, to tell them that Jesus really did pay for everything. He paid the price so that we could be forgiven. He paid it in full, everything, for every sin that you have done and that you will do. He paid the price so that you could be seen as righteous, so that you could be forgiven. And it is only through Jesus that you can go to heaven. It is only, in today's world, I feel like people think that they'll go to heaven just by being a good person. Like if you go ask someone on the street, what does it take to get to heaven? A lot of times you'll probably get, well, you have to be a good person and do this. But it is only through Jesus that you go to heaven. It says in John 14:6, Jesus told them, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. We have to realize that the only way to get to heaven is through Jesus. And so if you know him, awesome. Now it is your job to go and tell other people about him. It is your job to spread the gospel, to spread the good news, to tell people about the price that Jesus paid for them so they can go through the Father through him as well. Because Jesus is the one who was sacrificed so we could be forgiven, and it is only through him that we go to heaven. And this is why it's so important to tell other people about Jesus. This is why it's so important to invite people to youth group, to invite people to church, so you can bring them to a place where they will get to hear about Jesus and hear what Jesus has done for them. Guys, I am so grateful that someone invited me to youth group. Invited me to youth group so I could hear about Jesus and I could make the decision to have a relationship with him. And you guys are called for such a time as this. You are called. Each and every one of you are called to tell people about Jesus, to preach the gospel. You are here for such a time as this. In Esther 4:14, it says, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Like God has placed you in this time, in Wellington or Fort Collins or wherever you are, at this time for such a time as this, to reach other people, to reach your friends, to reach your teachers or your classmates or your teammates in sports. Like you are called to reach people. And there is hundreds of people that you guys can reach that I will never be able to, or that the leaders will never be able to. That Aaliyah could never reach, or Ellie could never reach, or Kaylee could never reach. Because we don't go to school with them, or whatever the situation is. You are called to reach people for such a time as this. If one person could do it all, that would make things much easier. But you have a specific calling. And you are here for such a time as this. Whether it is completely random, like at Walmart. Like the other day, Aaliyah and I were at Walmart trying to... What was I? I don't even know what I was getting things because we've been cleaning my apartment. And this random guy, actually it was Ethan's dad, called me asking about the Rockies game. And while I'm talking to him, I was like, oh yeah, so after church we're going to leave at 11. And someone heard me say that I was going to church in the morning. So then they came up to me and they asked, they're like, oh, like, I don't mean to like barge in, but did you say like you're going to church tomorrow? I was like, yeah, I did. And he's like, oh, well, I just moved here from California. I'm going to CSU, and I really want to find a church, but I just don't know where to go. I was like, oh, well, let me tell you. So I told him all about the River of Life, and it's in Wellington, and he said, I don't have a car. And I'm like, oh, dang it. Like, yeah, good luck getting in Wellington. But then I was able to I actually texted Kerry today, and he reached out. He's the, he helps with the CSU Chi Alpha Ministries. So then it's like, they do church stuff, and they have a fellowship on the CSU campus, and he's going to CSU. He just moved here from California, and I was like, perfect. So I texted Carrie. Carrie reached out to him, and just like random things like that. Was I going to Walmart expecting to tell someone about Chi Alpha and our church to hope that they get connected? No. I thought I was just going to get some like random things. But it's little things and random things like that. Like you are here for such a time as this. You can lead people to Jesus at Walmart. Or you can tell people about Jesus before a football game or volleyball game or softball game or whatever it is. Like you can bring your whole team to come to know Jesus. That might be what you are called to do. But you are on that team. You are in your school. You are in your house. You guys are called to preach the gospel, and you are here for such a time as this. He has placed you in this time to reach certain people for him, but I will tell you it takes boldness, it takes courage. Like, you have to step out. You have to step out and spread the gospel and tell people about Jesus. It is hard. It can be intimidating, but you have to just step out in boldness, and it's easy to invite someone to church, in my opinion. It's easy to invite someone to church or invite them to youth group. It's a little harder to give them the whole gospel message in like a grocery store or something, but you can invite them to church. You can invite them to youth group, but it takes boldness and courage. In Romans 1:16, it says, "For I am not ashamed of the good news about Christ. It is the power of God at work." You cannot be ashamed of the gospel. You cannot be ashamed of the good news, for it is the power of God at work, saving everyone who believes, the Jew first and also to the Gentile. The gospel, the good news, has the power. It is the power of God at work to save people. We cannot be ashamed of it. You cannot be ashamed to tell other people about Jesus, because if you don't tell them, then who knows if anyone will. And Jesus is the only way to heaven. Like, you have the answer to something that they need. So are you too ashamed to tell someone about Jesus, knowing that if you don't, no one might ever? You cannot be ashamed to preach the gospel. Instead, be bold for Jesus and tell others about him. And at the very least, like I said, invite them to church, invite them to youth group. I looked up statistics, and it says 83% of people go to church because of an invite from someone else. So the majority of people who go to church, or I would say most of you guys here in the youth group, like, who's here because someone invited you at some point in time? Most of you. I'm here because someone invited me a long time ago. 83% of people that go to church is because of an invite from someone else. And then listen to this. 7 out of 10 unchurched people, so of everyone who, unchurched person is just someone who doesn't go to church. 7 out of 10 unchurched people have never been invited to church in their life. 70% of people who don't go to church have never been invited to church in their life. How terrible is that? 70% of people have never been invited to church. This could be students around you. This could be your teachers in school. Like, man, we're mad about, a lot of people get so mad and they're frustrated about what the schools are teaching them, but then we're not like, you guys, go tell your teachers about Jesus. Invite them to church. If you want change, then start with that. Get some teachers who know Jesus. So 70% of people, unchurched people, have never been invited to church. 82% of the unchurched are at least likely to attend church if invited. 82% of people are likely to attend church if invited. All it takes is an invite to one of those 70% of the people, and they are likely to attend church. But if you never invite them, you'll never know. And the worst that someone could say is no. This one makes me really mad. It says only 2% of church members invite an unchurched person to church. 98% of churchgoers never extend an invitation in a given year. What are we doing? That 98% of people that go to church never invite someone else to church for a year? Man, we got to do better than that. It should be like 100% of people that go to the AMP at least invite someone else to youth group or church. It doesn't mean they're going to come or not, but you at least invite them. Only 2% of church members invite an unchurched person to church. That is terrible. Like, Jesus told us to go into all the nations and preach the gospel. And from this statistic, 2% of us are doing it. I know some of you guys are really good about inviting your friends to church. We're definitely not there's definitely more than 2% of people in here that do it. But we still got to do better. As a church in general, that is just, it should not happen. And like that first one said, 70% of people, unchurched people, have never been invited to church. It's like the worst you can do is invite them, and they say no. But the best that happens is like the one person who invited me, they didn't know I was going to come, but I came, I gave my life to Jesus, I have a nail in the cross, I went to Bible school, and now I'm a youth pastor. All because one person invited me to youth group. They did not realize the impact it had. You do not know the impact you could have on someone's life just by inviting them to church. And then I love this verse because it gives me it's like encouraging to know when I invite someone to church or when I tell them about Jesus that In Ecclesiastes 3:11, it says, "Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart." He has planted eternity in the human heart. So this means that every single person has eternity planted in their heart. And whether they know it or not, they are seeking Jesus. They are seeking after eternity. But what happens in today's world is people, while they're seeking for this thing, they don't realize it, but they try to fill it with everything else. So they're seeking for something. They have that hole in their heart, and they try to fill it with relationships, or they fill it with alcohol, or they fill it with drugs, or they fill it with all these other things, and then it never leaves them satisfied, and they always come back to this place where they're seeking the next thing. This is why, have you guys seen the movie Jesus Revolution? It talks about this in the movie, that the hippies at the time, like the hippie movement, they were all seeking something. And so for them, they were trying drugs. They were trying the next drug, and then the next drug, and they were going to raves, and they were doing all these things. And then finally they found this one guy who started telling them about Jesus, and that was the thing that they were seeking the whole time. They just didn't know it. Like the people around you, they have eternity placed in their heart. They are seeking it whether they know it or not. They might, because they don't know it, they might try to change their gender to find who they are. They might try to do all these other things to find and to fill this hole in their heart, or fill it with a boyfriend or girlfriend, or drugs or alcohol, or whatever it is. But that thing that they are seeking is Jesus. That hole in their heart can only be filled. The only way you will be satisfied and fulfilled is through a relationship with Jesus. So this is encouraging to know that when you are telling someone else about Jesus or inviting them to church, that even if they don't know it, there is something inside of them that is seeking after eternity, because eternity has been placed in the human heart by God. So they are searching for the thing that you have, but you have to tell them about Jesus, or you have to invite them to church or youth group. They are searching for it, so do something about it by spreading the love of Jesus with other people, or by just simply inviting them. These statistics blow my mind. Let's just not do that here. 2% of churchgoers invite someone a year. Terrible. 70% of unchurched people have never been invited in their life. I've heard so many people say, if I was invited to church, I would go. And some people use that as an excuse, but still, there are so many people that all it takes is an invite for them to step into a church or youth group, and their life and their eternity could be changed. So as you guys are back in school, or whatever it looks like, if you're homeschooled, you got people around you. You have neighbors. If you're in public school, perfect. You have hundreds of kids around you. Hundreds of people around you that probably don't know who Jesus is. So that's why the vision is to make Jesus known. And you guys are called to preach. You are called to tell other people about Jesus. It is what you are called to do. So remember that as you go to school. Start something, or whatever it looks like for you. We could talk. If you're like, man, I don't know what to do, talk to a leader. Talk to me. All right, looking for people to step up. Boys in the back. We need someone on the football team to pray before games. I can't do it. All right? If you play other sports, step up. Maybe no one on your team joins you. At least you tried. Okay? Make Jesus known. It is the vision for the year, because everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, but how can they call on him if they have never heard about him? Let's pray. Jesus, we just thank you for tonight. Lord, I thank you for your word that is alive and powerful, for your word that is 100% true, and that your word says that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. That your word says that we have come to for such a time as this. That your word says that the good news is the power of God at work, saving everyone who believes. So, Lord, I just pray that as we go throughout this week, we will just remember to tell other people about you, or to invite other people to church or youth group, knowing that you have planted eternity in their heart. Lord, that we would do what we can to make you known, to tell other people about you, to rob hell and fill heaven. So, Jesus, we just thank you for the price that you paid so that we could be forgiven, and that we are never too far gone for you. And in your name we pray. Amen.